Hi everyone, we're going to talk about Chapter 9, the third lesson, and it is about using affirmative and negative adverbs. So first I just want to review what an adverb even is. An adverb is a word that describes a verb, okay? So typically, here, let me write that down. Describes a verb. Typically in English, we have things that end in ly as a way to sort of describe those, like he is running quickly, or I go to the store frequently, or she danced beautifully, okay? So the ly in English is the equivalent most of the time for the ment ending in French, okay? So these words are just describing how a verb is done. Okay, so let me give you a couple of examples that you guys are already familiar with. Something like, je danse lentement, slowly. Okay, or elle mange rapidement. Or tu vas souvent. So here's an irregular, right? It doesn't have that ment there. Souvent au cinéma. You often go to the cinema. In fact, any of our frequency words will be our adverbs. So souvent, parfois, toujours, rarement, constamment, fréquemment, etc. Okay? So a lot of your frequency ones are going to be the ones that we talk about today because they give opposites. Okay? So we'll talk about those in terms of how to do this in negation. But first of all, our first negation, you might not have realized that our normal ne pas, our normal negation, is indeed an adverb. It's describing how that verb is done, which is to say, not at all. So another example might be, how about nous ne parlons pas. Okay, so you're noticing hopefully so far that every time you have a verb, okay, one verb, okay, that your article in general will go immediately after it. One verb, article, adverb after it, okay? So all of these are going to get placed in the same place right after your verb, including your pas. It just so happens that your little ne here has to go before, okay? But it's always going to be in the same place, and that also will work in all of our tenses. Your adverb in general is going to be placed directly after your first verb, even if you have two. Sometimes they can go a little bit further down in the sentence because they're kind of long, but for the most part, your placement is good right after the verb. So going back to that, talking about negatives, let's take that a different sentence here. Like, for example, je mange des cookies. Okay, I'm eating the cookies. Now, if I want to put my negation in, I'm going to, of course, put it in, no problem. Je ne mange pas. But what happens to my article? This may have been something that you remember. After ne pas, when you have un, une, des, and du, de la, de l'apostrophe, all of these will become de or d apostrophe after you've negated. Okay? However, your le, la, les, l apostrophe, after it's been negated, it will still stay the same. Okay, so let me put that in a box as well, just so there's no confusion. And why is that? So let's think through a couple of examples. I think that would probably be the most helpful for us. Let's say that I said, tu regardes les chiens. You're looking at the dogs versus tu regardes des chiens. You're looking at some dogs. Now, if I put my negation in here, it's going to be the same, right? Ne pas around my verb. Okay. But the negation in this first one, tu ne regardes pas les chiens. You are not watching the dogs. That still makes sense. If I wanted to try and do the negation here with where I had a de, it doesn't make any sense when I try to say something like, you're not watching some dogs, because what you really are trying to say is, you're not watching any dogs. So when you have these articles that are really quantity articles, okay, these are quantity, then what's going to happen is when you negate it, you're kind of trying to turn it into sounding like, oh, you're not doing it at all. You're not doing any of that thing. So because of that, you go for the most general form, and this will become de or d apostrophe in the case of a vowel. Okay? So we actually know all of these rules already, or at least you're supposed to know them already. So the rest of this lesson is really just more about vocabulary. So what are some additional adverbs that we have and how to do them in negation? So let's look over here in our book. We have page 246 and 247. We've talked already about some of these adverbs like toujours, souvent, and parfois. And we've talked about ne pas. Okay, so we've already reviewed that. And then we have this section right here. Okay, and that is these new affirmative and new negative ones that you probably have not encountered before. So our negative ones are going to work exactly like ne pas did. Namely, you put your ne before the first verb, and you put your other word, plus, pas encore, and jamais, after that. Of still, the opposite would be to no longer do it, or to do something no more. So they give the great example here. Le train est encore sur le quai. The train is still on the platform. This is, maybe write that down. Plus replaces pas. Okay, you do not double them up. Same thing here for déjà, already. Nos valises sont déjà là. Our suitcases there already. This you might remember as from the expression déjà vu. Okay, vu is the past participle of voir, which means to see. So déjà vu is the experience of having already seen something. The opposite, the negation, would be ne pas encore, which is pretty tricky because you see that the opposite of encore is not ne pas encore. Okay, so that's tricky. Just make sure that you pay very close attention to that. So the opposite of already is not yet, ne pas encore. Nos valises ne sont pas encore là. So this one does indeed have the pas in there, and this encore should be bolded, I'm sorry. Okay. They'll go together. Ne pas encore. The last one that we're working on today is déjà as the word meaning ever. So, est-ce que tu es déjà, or est-ce que tu, oh, they have a typo in this, that's funny. So, est-ce que tu es déjà allé à Lyon? Have you ever been to Lyon? So that A is supposed to go right here. And the opposite here is ne jamais, which is never. Non, je ne suis jamais allé à Lyon. I've never been to Lyon. So the key here is, well, how did I get déjà to be used twice? And they have somehow different negatives. That really has to do mostly with the fact that, remember that French has fewer words than English does, and so they sometimes have to double up on things. But the other thing is tense. Ever and ne jamais tend to go with passé composé. So one of the other opposites, add a section here, is any of those words for frequency. So toujours, souvent, parfois, quelquefois, which means sometimes. That would be the opposite also of ne jamais, right? If I always do something, je fais toujours du ski. The opposite is I never do something. Je ne fais jamais du ski. Okay? So maybe I'll just highlight that one so that you guys kind of remember to add that on. All right. The way that the de works with these, namely with your articles, namely un, une, des, du, de, la, de, à l'apostrophe, changing to de, indeed works the same way, okay? So here's some examples here of affirmative and negative and that article becoming de. Je vois toujours des Américains dans l'autocar. So here I am with that first example. Okay, right here. Je vois toujours des Américains dans l'autocar. I always see Americans on the tour bus. Versus, je ne vois jamais de Français dans l'autocar. So my des plus a group of people became de plus a group of people because I have my negation here. Avez-vous encore des billets? Will become non, je n'ai plus de billets à vendre. Karen a déjà des amis en France. Vincent n'a pas encore d'amis, the apostrophe, because I have a vowel here. Okay? These all happened to be des, but it could have been un and une, it could have been du and de la. All right. The definite articles, the le, la, les will not change, as you see in number 2 here. Okay. We've talked about the passé composé briefly, where they are generally placed between the auxiliary and the past participle. So I'll give you a quick example of that. Well, I guess you have one. Monsieur Huet a toujours pris l'avion. I'll give you another one. Je n'ai jamais vu une baleine. Let's look at that real quick. Je n'ai jamais vu une baleine. I've never seen a whale. But, I've got my negation here. What happens to my une? Hopefully you correctly guessed and could correct it. Je n'ai jamais vu de baleine. I've never seen a whale, as in I've never seen any whale. All right. This last one is just kind of an additional thing, number 4. Ne and pas du tout. Du tout is just for emphasis. It's just, kind of extra. There's no affirmative form of ne pas. There's no affirmative form of ne pas du tout. It just exists as itself, okay? Because the original affirmative is just a normal sentence. Okay, so what I'm going to have you guys do is this first exercise on page 248. Un voyageur nerveux. Chaque fois qu'il part en vacances, Monsieur Lafont se préoccupe de tout. Madame Lafont essaie toujours de le calmer. Avec un camarade, jouez les rôles de Monsieur et Madame Lafont. Suivez le modèle. So you have Monsieur Lafont, who is constantly negative, and his wife is the sunshine and, you know, positivity shining everywhere. So Monsieur Lafont says something like, Tu n'as pas encore trouvé les valises. So he's got the negative. Pas encore. And Madame Lafont is just going to redo the sentence. In this case, the tu becomes je, but you still have the same idea for verbs, right? Passé composé of trouver. And you're going to think, okay, what's the opposite of this negation? The opposite of ne pas encore, if I go back up to my book, the opposite of ne pas encore is déjà, up here at the top, right? So that's why she's going to fill that in, and she's going to say, j'ai déjà trouvé des valises, because the opposite of ne pas encore is déjà. Let me do one of them with you. Nous ne faisons jamais de voyage agréable. So my negation here is ne and jamais. If I go back into my little table there, I would know that I've got some choices here. We never take agreeable trips or nice trips. So let's look at the opposite for ne jamais. Which one would you pick? Would you maybe pick déjà, as in we already go on nice trips, or maybe you take something from toujours, souvent, parfois, quelquefois. We always go. Okay. Let's take a look at that. Let's see whichever one we think fits the best. Sometimes there's not always one. Nous ne faisons jamais de voyage agréable. I'm going to rewrite my sentence now with the affirmative. Nous, my verb is faisons. Nous faisons. Jamais. We never do them. We always do them. We sometimes do them. You can kind of pick which one you'd like here. Maybe let's pick this one. Nous faisons souvent. And then I'm going to try and copy paste this. De voyage agréable. And I'm going to look and see, does my sentence make sense? Nous faisons souvent de voyages agréables. Maybe you will have seen that I have one little error in here, and that is that when I went from negative to positive, I want to watch my articles. My article no longer needs to be this general de here. I want to make it make sense with voyage agréable, which is a masculine and plural noun. So I'm going to change it to des. Nous faisons souvent des voyages agréables. We often take agreeable trips. Okay? So I'm going to have you do this exercise with a partner where you're replacing the negative thing with the affirmative and watching out for articles. Okay, so let me just maybe write that down here. Replace with affirmative. And watch for articles. Don't forget, your un, une, des, du, de, la, de, l'apostrophe will change to de, but your le, la, les will stay the same. Okay. Next part is our last thing, and that is that we have another type of negation that we haven't really talked about, and we're going to talk about it right here. Okay, we have what's called a partial negation. Okay, a partial negation, or we might call this a restriction. Okay, which is to say it's not completely negative, it's not the complete negative, and it doesn't have a complete affirmative, but you're restricting it somewhat, but not completely. So over here, we have that restriction here. La négation ne que. The expression ne and que, where you put the que as if, you know, it'd be the same places where you'd put the pas, right? is used to indicate a limited quantity, but that doesn't mean it's gone, of something or limitation of choices. It has the same meaning as seulement, which means only. And in fact, seulement as an adverb, you'll see the ment there, it goes right after the verb. And so my ne que is also going to do that same thing. My que goes right after the verb. Same place as where you're doing ne pas. They give an example here. Hélène n'a fait que de réservations. Hélène a fait seulement de réservations. And the original example, je n'ai qu'un billet, j'ai seulement un billet. So the difference here, and you might kind of wonder, well, why is there two ways to do this? Why is there one that is seulement and why is there one that says ne que? There's not really necessarily a huge distinction between these, but if I had to make one, I would say that that ne que puts a little bit more emphasis on the limitation. Okay, and the limitation specifically of a quantity of something. But like I said, that's really, really splitting hairs. But you do need to know how to use ne que because it will come up. And it is used quite often, perhaps because it's shorter than the word seulement. I'm not really sure, but it's definitely a good one to know. You will notice two things about it, though, in these examples. The first is that when I used ne que, I still had an article here like un, une, des, du, de, la, de, l'apostrophe. And why is that? It's because it's still a quantity. It's limited, but it's still a quantity, and I want to emphasize the quantity itself because that's what I'm trying to limit. That's what I'm trying to express. I'm trying to express the fact that it is only a certain amount, but I don't want to completely get rid of the amount. Okay? So that's the first thing, is that with ne que, you can actually keep your un, une, des, du, de, la, de, l'apostrophe. The other thing is the placement of ne que. The que usually will go right before the thing that's being limited. So oftentimes we would put our pas right here, right? Right in between our first verb and our second verb in the passé composé. But your que is actually going to go whatever is right before the thing that you are limiting in quantity. So it's whatever it is. It can be a quantity of something, or it can actually be a verb. Like say that you want to say something like, je ne fais que du ski. Okay, I only ski. Je ne fais que du ski. I'm using the que right before the thing that's being limited, which is to say the activities, and in this case, the only one left is skiing. Okay, so my que happens to be here right where it's supposed to be, but if it were a longer list, it could certainly go in another place, just as long as it's right before the thing that it's limiting. All right, this exercise I'm going to also have you do with your partner. En voyage, dites ce que font ces personnes quand elles sont en voyage, remplacez seulement par ne que. So you are replacing the seulement with your ne que here. Example, je prends seulement le train. Now I'm going to put my ne que around the verb. Je ne prends que le train. I'll do one example with you. Martin envoie seulement les cartes postales. So I'm going to have my verb here. I'm going to put my ne que around it. Martin n'envoie que des cartes postales. He's only sending postcards, as in to say he's not also sending packages. Okay? So wherever your seulement is generally where you're going to put the que. All right. If you guys can prepare yourselves by doing this exercise here with Monsieur and Madame Lafont and this exercise here with ne que before you come to class so that you can share with a partner, that would be great so that you're not wasting too much time and you're really just getting a good chance to share and ask questions if you are confused. All right, friends, see you next time.